sound వస్తుంది. Good evening. Thank you so much for sparing your Sunday evening. And I congratulate all the students who have written with anthropology as an optional subject, and especially those with social classes as your identity. So basically, I think looking at the paper, I thought your efforts are reaping the benefit, along with, of course, my own efforts in making you what you are. And see, basically, this is going to be a talk about the major trends of the paper, as well as certain areas here and there I will pick up to discuss what exactly you have to write in the form of the answer. The structures we will be largely discussing. And here I warmly welcome the people who have joined in the online mode, and of course you people, you know, sparing your day today. I know వీళ్ళకి పేపర్స్ ఇవ్వట్లేదండి, అవసరం లేదంటున్నారా? ఇట్స్ ఓకే. ఓకే. I am anyway showing the questions on the screen, not all of them at a time, but one after the other. Nevertheless, before I go to talk about each of those questions, I would want to give a basic analysis of the paper 1 first, and then we will go to the analysis of paper 2, and we will pick up followed by certain questions to deal with. The reason why I started with congratulations is that UPSC did not try to trouble you this time. As such, it never troubled so much, but then. And when I say did not trouble you so much, it is like, there are no surprises anywhere, no across the exam hall, no panic kind of things. As far as most of the students who have gone to the exam, their feedback is concerned, many of them could clear the paper, could actually finish the paper. That's very, very important. And interpretation-based things are very limited. There are a couple of questions whose meaning had to be understood in the paper 1 and paper 2 as well, that we will see. And yeah, conventional kind of a paper without any kind of new things that are thrown up. That I think is at the first place jolly good comfort for the students of the optional subject. And also, I think those of you who are planning to write the exam next year, for you, I think this paper must have given you the necessary boost, and having a confidence that we are not really very off from the paper, from the syllabus. We are, I think, going by what the exam actually requires. Now, looking at the paper 1, there are, I'm trying to categorize it into a specific way. As far as your paper 1 is concerned, there are about 5 thought-based questions. So let me just see them first. At 1C, you have Brown's idea of status, role, and institutions. And at 1E, participatory rural appraiser and PLA. I am placing that along with thought-based questions because that is a research methodology thing. And we have 4B, historical and cultural context that led to superseding ethnocentrism with cultural relativism in anthropology. And we have 7B, historical development of fieldwork traditions in anthropology till recent times. We have one more, 7C, approaches of White, Stewart, and Salins in the light of cultural evolution. I think These are
historical
the
and cultural context that led to
questions. And
superseding ethnocentrism with cultural relativism in
I have
anthropology.
mentioned this earlier also
And
in your classes that the categorization of questions section wise or maybe perhaps paper wise categorization also had been given up by UPSC. I think this paper demonstrates that very clearly. Several things of section 1 appeared in section 2 and vice versa. And also we see good number of questions related to paper 2 coming up in paper 1. That's the reason why I also keep telling that don't try to wait for the 1-2 hours gap in between paper 1 and paper 2, so that you can revise in that time kind of, because many of the questions of paper 2 would have already come in paper 1. There is nothing much that you would be in a position to revise in that break. I think the examiner heard that as well. So let me see India in paper 1. India based questions. In the first paper, first question itself, Mesolithic rock art in Indian subcontinent. So from archaeology. So all these from archaeology only. So archaeology also really stole the show. 2C, suitable examples, typo-technological problems of Indian Paleolithic industry with reference environmental hypotheses. And then the third question, 3A, that is animal domestication in Indian microlithic industry. So India related questions, 3 of them. I mean, that's really an interesting phenomenon. And also you see in paper 1, in section 1, all the 3 questions, that is 1, 2 and 3, the 3 questions have archaeology in them. So it's only the 4th question that doesn't have an archaeology segment. And if at all in the 4th question you are okay with 4A, that is anthropometric measurements, anthropometry somatotypes of Carter's and Heath's scheme, if that is studied by you, then perhaps you would be able to answer this. If at all you have not done this Carter scheme and simply sticking to what is the conventional way of studying somatotypic classifications, if at all you have done that, then this 20 marks you are risking, and hence you would be dragged into definitely writing. One more question I forgot to mention here. 3C, if you observe, that is also something to do with archaeology. That is the distinction of classical and modern or evolved Neolithic Neanderthal is still valid, or whatever kind of the position of Neanderthal in the human evolutionary picture. So it pretty well shows that either you are attempting archaeology or you are risking this 20 marker in 4A, as simple as it is. You can perhaps count the number of questions that have come from archaeology segment. When I am doing this for paper 1, paper 2 also let us see archaeology, where and all it has come. 1A, I mean there is some bit of experiment here in paper 2. Examiner was trying to see how far you remember things. So directly he is not asking some of those questions. Say for example, when I am talking about archaeology related questions in paper 2, we have one called Pit Dwellers of Kashmir. अच्छा ये I have actually put in the groups and all. आप mobile पे अपना open करके देख सकते हो, ठीक है? I won't mind using mobile today, no, in the session. Otherwise, yeah. So one is 1A, pit dwelling units, pit dwellers of Kashmir. Then second question B, what are the arguments for excluding Narmada man from the Homo erectus category? That is an interesting question. Then we have 3A, make a critical appraisal of megalithic traditions in India with special reference to northeastern India. 3 questions. And then one more we have 4C, no, 4B hai, 4B. that is a brief account of proto-history of Gujarat, discuss the significance of Gujarat proto-history in international trade. I mean, those are the 4 questions of archaeology. So can you make a small count, how many numbers, how many marks put together in paper 1 and paper 2 for archaeology? ఇప్పుడు మొత్తం CSET లెక్కలు చేస్తున్నారు ఏమి 60 marks in paper 2 and in paper 1 another 75, another 60, 55. So somewhere around 120 marks, 120 out of your 500 marks. I mean quite a decent amount, 125 or so. So basically it is needless to say that we should be thankful to God that He was kind enough in accommodating the areas that we discussed in the class. I mean that was fingers crossed. Ever since students have gone into the exam hall and they came out, I was only praying and wishing that whatever we have discussed at different places, maybe in Anthro Run, maybe in various other programs, the questions have to be there. I mean, it was a major solace when the first message that we got from a student was most of the questions that we have identified in the important areas list, they were there in the exam. I mean, that was a big solace. ऐसा नहीं तो मतलब अंडे टमाटर फुटेंगे kind of. So that fear is always there. So we will, and when it comes to paper 2, sir, there is something interesting here. I will show that analysis and then we'll slowly go into. There are certain thinker-based questions. Thinkers-based questions, there are 5 questions in paper 2. So 4 questions in archaeology, that makes about a 60. And thinker-based questions, there are 5 of them there. 4 of them. We have one of Iravati Karve, 2A, Iravati Karve's contributions to Indian anthropology. Then for the last 2 years, I was waiting for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to come in the exam. This year he came. I am very thankful to UPSC, describing Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's arguments on caste. And the third question we have is 3B, S.C. Dubey's contributions to Indian village studies. And 3C we have Risley, describe the methods adopted by Risley in classifying Indian population, give the criticism. So that was a 15 marker. So he is not exactly asking the classification, but in and around that he is trying to ask. So yeah. And then one more we have is 7A. Yeah, this is a repeated question. Views of Ghuriye and Elwin on the approach towards tribal population. What are the policies of government of India towards Indian tribal population? So basically it is a question on tribal Panchashil, and it is also a question on approaches, assimilation, integration, and isolation kind of things. Those are the ones. So on that note, let me begin your questions. So when it comes to paper 1, so the idea is we are trying to give you the structures of these questions. Formalism and substantivist approaches. The question actually can begin with the contemporary idea, futility of the debate. I know your paper is beginning with a negative comment, but it is fine. Currently it is a debate that is considered to be futile. Then we have to give the basic idea behind the approaches in terms of use of economics, principles of economics, whatsoever. Your answer should follow by the names of the thinkers, such as you have Raymond Firth, Herskovits kind of people, people like Malinowski, so the thinkers should come. And major distinguishing elements. Phone vaadamante alla kaadandi. Major distinguishing elements that may be in terms of primitive man as a rational man, rationality, shortages of resources, profit maximization, etc. In fact, you may perhaps even incorporate the ideas of Moss on gift and substantivism. You may perhaps end with Moss and get it connected to the contemporary anthropology that does not give much of importance to the kind of approaches. As I said to you, we are not actually trying to discuss the whole thing. I mean, it is basically to give the structures and try to tell you what other kinds of questions you can prepare for the next year's exam. Basically that. In fact, the team was also telling if you start talking, you'll discuss the entire subject and we will not be able to go back home tonight. So try to keep it as brief as possible. And I said, very much fine. But then I was also skeptical about today's evening, because students, after writing their exam, whether will they be able to join this discussion or not. But then some of the students said that no, we should have on that day, they though, I mean, kind of. Then I said, okay, fine. We are living in a democratic world in an undemocratic way. So let us look at the other questions also. Mesolithic rock art in Indian subcontinent. Yeah, that's the second question. Your answer must start with an argument about a rock art in Mesolithic which is unconventional, in European archaeology or prehistory. And there itself, you are actually presenting this as both a strength and weakness of Indian archaeological phases. This forms your introduction. Then we have a whole lot of sites headed by Bhimbetka, which is a signature site, but you can perhaps look at most of the Middle India. A small map can happen showing at least 4 or 5 major sites where art forms were found. This is second part. Third part of your answer is giving general characteristics of the art form culture, with most of it being cave art. That is where you write about nature of cave art, the usage of color, the kind of themes. All this has to be connected to who was the man, biological man of the time. Biological man of the time, and his time period. Mesolithic rock arts of Indian. So map is mandatory, sir. And see, whenever we are writing about any archaeological sites, I mean, we have good number of questions in archaeology. It is very much important that we incorporate the names of the thinkers. Say, for example, in this context, we have one of the earliest archaeologists who had found the Middle Indian Mesolithic art form culture. So the students, the entire constabulary of Carlyle, his researchers have to be part of your answer. And quickly going through the others, we have the third one, Brown's status, role, and institutions. May I go? May I go? He is actually asking you a question on these three are the narrations. Those three are the narrations or meanings. These three terms are his basic vocabulary: social structure, social organization, social institution, and the role they are actually playing, status of individuals, role played by them, and the norms. Basically, this being a 10 marker, so your introduction has to be with these terms form the basic vocabulary of Brown in explaining various social facts towards building a social science, building social laws. Having said that, you explain all three of them, meaning of it with examples. Maybe perhaps you can take institution of joint family, you can take the clan institution, or in his own style of writing about army. And your further remarks can be, so this forms your first part, this is your second part of the answer, explanation of them. Follow it up with the examples, number 3. Number 4 can be a passing reference on several parallel usages by other thinkers. You are not exactly elaborating on them. Maybe perhaps the names you can use, like whoever has used institutions, organizations, kind of. And then finally you say that, give a positive kind of a remark that this had added a new dimension to the understanding of structural aspect of culture, kind of things. Nothing controversial, don't be very emotional, don't be any kind of, have a negative kind of a thing. pedigree analysis and genetic counseling. In fact, this was something that was asked earlier also in a specific manner. We may begin by talking about this is a concept that is used in applied physical anthropology, especially in the contemporary times. With increasing instances of maybe adoption, maybe late marriages, late marital age kind of things. With that, you may perhaps begin. Having said that, you give the basic definition or meaning of pedigree analysis. You are not here to describe the entire pedigree analysis, because what we need here is how it is being used in genetic counseling in 150 words. So we are not exactly writing the entire explanation of pedigree analysis, but what you do is, we may perhaps talk about the utilities and link them with genetic counseling. Utilities such as study of inheritances, X-linked inheritance, Y-linked inheritances, then autosomal, chromosomal abnormalities. These are one category there, meaning in the case of genetic counseling on issues such as marriage, adoption of children, or instances such as prediction of genetic diseases, kind of things, and trying to understand or recommend nature-nurture combinations, dealing with increasing cases of abortions, etc. I mean, those are the instances. In those instances, how various things related to pedigree studies can be made use of. This is only one, X-linked inheritances. The other things which we find in applied physical anthropology, specific studies you may bring in. I know you would be rejoicing this study, that is the British royal family's study of hemophilia, or the kind of the Tsar societies of Russia, the royal societies of Russia, and then the kind of studies conducted in German occupational groups, such as German army, particular lineages of beggars, huge number of them. I mean, you may perhaps write different case studies there to show that these are the studies where we actually found the kind of utilities, and hence in the current times, in those circumstances, you may perhaps make use of pedigree studies. So basically, to ensure having positive traits in the future. So you may perhaps conclude the answer by linking it with eugenic movement and contemporary positive applications of genetic studies. Because when we have introduced, we started with that. Applied physical anthropology, contemporary applications, and then you're also trying to conclude on the same lines with improving the future genetic pool and then applications in the genetic studies. I mean, don't worry about it. I just wanted to have these things to be brought in with your discussion. See, conventionally, rapid rural appraisal and participatory rural appraisal, these are the terms that are actually used either in your previous exams or kind of syllabus descriptions, etc. Then what we are getting here is participatory learning and action, PLA, which is nothing but an extension of PRA. So basically, when we are talking about PRA and PLA, those are the vital facts anyway. Let me give you the introduction. Both of them are connected to the contemporary needs of anthropological fieldwork techniques. With both of them being a part of rapid anthropological studies. I am not saying rural, rapid anthropological studies. With PRA largely a component within RRA. Now, when we talk about PLA, your answer lies here. So, here what you will be doing is, that screen is very much fine, but here you will explain the methodology of PRA in brief, as the name suggests, participatory rural appraisal. Basically, it is a rural kind of a study. You would write about Dubey and various other people. This is learning in action. So, this actually shows that when PRA is extended, PRA is put into action, that emerges as PLA number 1. Second thing is, your answer must communicate that PLA is nothing but PRA plus action orientedness plus non-rural studies as well. It is not simply rural, but it can be applied to various other circumstances. That is where you can perhaps bring in various situations where participatory learning and action related appraisals can be conducted. And your conclusion actually should give you that whether it is the governmental organizations or NGOs or any international bodies, funding organizations, even academicians, for all of them in the field of anthropology, it is now the action orientedness that has to be the buzzword, and hence PLA is a significant aspect now. May I go? We have the other questions at 2A. Anthropology is a systematic, objective, holistic study of humankind in all times and places. This is actually a question about scope of anthropology. Instead of asking for scope of anthropology, he is trying to actually ask a question on the kind of methodology of work and the subject matter. Now, there are three keywords here: systematic, objective, holistic study across time and space. So, we should be incorporating temporal and spatial studies. Now, you will have to define your question in such kind of long statements. You will have to define, you will have to bring the question into the exact meaning of it. So, basically you may perhaps start by talking about anthropology. So, this is an assertion that he is trying to give, and mostly we accept this assertion. And you may perhaps begin by talking about the discipline which is considered to be the study of man. Maybe perhaps you can use the statements of Herskovits, or you may perhaps use M.N. Srinivas' definition of sociocultural anthropology. So, you have to begin by some kind of a statement given by the thinkers who are explaining the scope of anthropology. Having said that, you may begin your story with holism. That goes well with the scheme. So, this you may perhaps talk about the features of anthropology. One is its orientation of holism. When you are talking about holism, good lot of thinkers you may bring. You may talk about Tyler, you may talk about maybe Malinowski, who are trying to give integrationalistic and comprehensive study of the culture, etc. Second one is, when we talk about objective, in objective we need to incorporate the focus on evidences, empiricism, meaning the one that goes by evidence, that is by fieldwork traditions. Objective is the one that goes by evidences, the one that goes by empiricism, the one that has fieldwork traditions based on which the studies are conducted. At every place we are supposed to give the reference of the thinkers, we are supposed to give the examples as well. So, this is the third one. So, you may perhaps give the Boasian ideas of objectivism. And the third one we have is systematic study. When we talk about systematic study, we are actually talking about a scientific approach to study the culture, study the man, scientific approach to study the man. When we say scientific approach to study the man, maybe we are talking about how the people with scienticism like Malinowski had tried to do scientific approach. What are all the various approaches? That may be sampling method, that may be participant observation, various other things. So, all those have to come in there, and across the temporal and the spatial, in the sense that based on historical approach, based on synchronic and diachronic approaches, the study of anthropology actually lies, and that is how things are. You are actually explaining the assertion that is being given to you. You may perhaps in the concluding remarks, you may perhaps conclude by the emerging challenges to anthropology in those realms, especially in terms of across all times and places. So, what are the major challenges? Maybe one or two statements you can give regarding the challenges, and you may perhaps end your story. I go back. The other one that we have is various forms of primate social organizations. Various forms of primate social organizations. Basically, we are here trying to bring the studies from primatology. There is a question on various primatological researches. Your answer may begin by mentioning how the primates, especially our studies in anthropology, are on great apes and of course humans. You may perhaps begin by talking about the gregarious nature of the primates, because of which social groupings, social organizations have been essential entities for their survival and reproduction. Having said this, this is your introduction. And you may link it with the second part by mentioning at least a short list of researchers who had worked on the prominent, on some of these great ape families, such as chimpanzees, bonobos, or gorilla, etc. So you are supposed to bring at least one of the thinkers each for various popular primatological studies. This forms your second part. Without this, you don't try to move forth. In all these, and popular studies on orang, etc., in all this, you will have to bring in mechanisms like group living, living in troops, living as sexually distinctive populations, groups as enculturation. I mean, this word looks interesting. Enculturation entities, kind of merge with man. Your last paragraph should talk about how. So various entities, for example, I mean, those are some categories I am writing: group living, troops, and sexually distinctive populations, enculturation entities, and various others. So basically, you are trying to explain in each of them. So when I talk about troops, which of them have troops? So chimpanzees have, gorillas have. What is the behavior in the troop? Or for example, sexually distinctive populations, which primates have, and what is the purpose of such kind of a distinctive entity? So you are trying to explain the kind of relationships, the kind of the grooming of the young ones, and the kind of support they give towards one another. And you conclude with man as the highest primate who had gained sophistication in all of them. And actually this process you try to show as the cultural evolution along with the biological evolution that was happening with man. So that is where your answer will be. Eternal problem, very common question. Typo-technological problems faced by Indian Paleolithic. The rest of it is redundant thing. That's of course because of environmental hypothesis. Your answer should have 4 major components. So basically the question is, with suitable examples, explain, discuss the problem of typo technological issues in Indian Paleolithic industry. You may perhaps begin your answer by talking about this problem as a major stumbling block in establishing the strength of Indian prehistory, as a major contribution to cultural emergence and evolution. I repeat what I said. You can begin by talking about this problem as a major stumbling block in the establishment of Indian prehistory in the cultural emergence and cultural evolution. Having said that, you are actually taking your discussion. I'm sure you're not writing 1, 2, 3, it is for your own understanding. Periodization and related problems in India. When we say periodization, basically you are talking about the lower, middle, upper Paleolithic, followed by Mesolithic. So your entire discussion is, this has been difficult in India. All those necessary researches you will have to bring in, Yale Cambridge study, studies of D. Terra and Patterson, in that paragraph itself, you will have to mention that it was Sankalia who was actually dealing with that problem and trying to address it. Now, when we are talking about difficulty, all the difficulties we will have to bring in. What are all the problems that we are facing? Like, whether it may be Paleolithic art, or it may be the lack of fossil evidences, lack of huge lot of, so I am trying to make a short list of them. Some of the issues, some of the difficulties which you will have to mention may include lack of fossil evidences, lack of proper evidence of human work, such as whether they are Eolithic or Clactonian tools. Questions related to art form culture, problem related to geological formations, etc. From there, you may perhaps talk about what fossil evidences you have, how exactly that is insufficient. So basically when you are talking about this, when we Indian Paleolithic kind of a thing, finally when H.T. Sankalia decides, comes up with this idea that yes, definitely we have these, three major phases. There you talk about, you finally give the kind of timeline. You give the timeline for those phases. So the timeline has to be comparative. You have to give India and either European timeline or African timeline to have a broader comparison. And finally, you say that effort was made to realize the objective of having, but still that's an inconclusive thing, you will have to go by that. Still there is a difference of opinion on that. We have this question. So basically, which question has to be picked up for a better score, if at all I am going by that? See, anyway 1 and 5 you are taking up, and after that, if you are having archaeology at your hand, you may perhaps take number 2 as well as number 3, and when it comes to paper 1 section 2, in section 2 if you observe, I will go back sir to question number 3 etc. In section 2, 6, 7, 8 if we are observing, just have a look at it. In question number 6 we have, those of you, I hope you are having, right? In question number 6, you have social control mechanisms in different political systems. In 6b, you have what is health and burden of lifestyle diseases. So this is basically a question of non-communicable diseases, rise of non-communicable diseases. And the third one is reasons for the reduction in age in the menarche. Actually, last year was also, there was this question, secular trends in the human growth. This looks to be on the same lines. This is also talking about the secular trends only. So if at all you have studied the examples, the case studies related to menarche, then you will be able to attempt this question. So the catch here is, you might have been good at 2 of them. Second question also, if at all you have done enough of work on non-communicable diseases, you will be able to attempt that. So 2 questions you are getting from biological anthropology, 1 on menarche, 1 on non-communicable disease, that is your epidemiological anthropology, 1 you are getting from political anthropology. So this is one. Coming to the 7th question, 7a, b and c. 7a, discuss the role of evolutionary force in creating human diversity. It is a proper human genetics question. So if at all you have studied the population genetics and basic genetic related things, you will be able to attempt that. Second one is again field work related one, anthropological theory. Third one is anthropological theory. So what we are seeing is 6 and 7. In one question he is giving 2 from biological anthropology, 1 from the social anthropology. In the other one, 2 from social anthropology, 1 from biological anthropology. So you cannot eliminate either of them. ऐसा नहीं कि if at all somebody has said to you that social anthro is scoring or biological anthro is scoring, you try to go with it, you are not in a position to eliminate the other one. So the idea is you will have to be conversant with all the topics. There is no shortcut about it. And question number 8. 8a is demographic theories, socio-cultural demographic theories. 8b is the blood group related categorizations, that is the core bio. The third one is applied physical anthropology, where you are asked a question about anthropometry, how anthropological knowledge of human body may be used to designing equipments and articles for the human use. This is anthropometry related question. So here what is happening is, all the 3 he is giving from biology, biological anthropology, but 2 of them are from applied physical anthropology, 1 from the core. So in the applied anthropology, if at all you are missing out on any of them, most often student might miss out on the demographic theories thing, which is actually scoring if at all somebody is earnestly doing. Because of that, you are actually losing the rest of the ones. So, I mean, everywhere there is one catch. That you will have to. And when you are trying to pick up questions, what we generally see in the exam is, if any question of core anthropological thought is there, you should and must be picking up that question. If I am going by that kind of an analysis, your seventh question becomes mandatory for you in these set of questions. So seventh, if you are taking up, it is based on how you are faring in section 1, your choice of section 2 will be. So if I am going by the best kind of a selection, I would go for 7, and then the compulsory question in paper 1 will be, I mean, if we have to choose one, question could be maybe second question, which is a relatively non-controversial, non-interpretative kind of a one. So second, and then you have 7. Out of the remaining, if one is really good at archaeology, you would do 3 as an additional question, or you will go for 8 in paper 2. Okay. And see, generally what I tell the students is, when you are picking up the question paper, you will have to see which questions you are not supposed to attempt. You will have to strike off those questions which are not supposed to be attempted. But in this paper, I don't see anything like that. You don't have any question that shall not be attempted. I mean, that's a big bonus for you. That problem you are relieved of. Let us go to the other questions. Sir, I am going to 3B. Enumerate the evidence of animal domestication in Indian archaeology, Indian microlithic industry. Indian microlithic industry. So basically, domestication, microlithic industry. That was one question which I thought, I mean, I don't need any special kind of a discussion. Basically, the question talks about how the descent rules contradict with the matrilineal society. So basically, it is all the examples that you are going to give where a combination is there. Both matri and patri kind of combinations are there. It is those kind of questions there. Now let me come to this. Animal domestication in Indian microlithic industry. Basically, it is talking about, when I say microlith industry, this is Mesolithic cultural age. The other key word is animal domestication, meaning very early kind of food gathering with a bit of pastoral nature. In this answer, the expectation of the examiner will be so your introduction will be based on Indian microlithic industry experienced different phases in evolution, where in the advanced Mesolithic, domestication emerges. That can be your introduction, meaning you are going to write those 3 or 4 phases of Indian Mesolithic with the chief characteristics among them when you are coming here, you have the microlith industry with domestication of animals. When I am giving this, your table must consist of the timeline. The phases of Indian Mesolithic, the 4 phases, at the highest phase, microlithic, combined with domestication and the timeline. Your explanation is here. So, you will elaborate on this, elaborate on features and at least a couple of sites. In the features, your focus should be on which kind of animals are domesticated, the purpose of them, and the evidence about them. This is number 1. Secondly, what kind of tool typologies, microlithic tool typologies. A comment is very much necessary on the proportion of geometric tools to give an idea about their advanced nature. I repeat what I said. This is a question about the early food gathering pastoral communities of India, which are otherwise called the early Mesolithic cultures. We have different phases in Indian Mesolithic. You bring those phases, and about the uppermost one, you elaborate the features in terms of what animals domesticated, what is the evidence you have, what is the utility of them, what kind of tools, and which thinkers if possible, and then the sites there. Okay. Your conclusion has to be on how superior or inferior Indian Mesolithic or microlithic tool industry is when compared to European microlithic industry. This is one kind of a conclusion. One kind of a conclusion is you would be writing, see, definitely our microlithic industry is considered to be inferior when compared to European, because Europeans said that. We have no choice to, you either conclude with that, or you may say that, see, the Mesolithic culture along with the domestication of animals also had come up with the growing of the plant varieties, all that comes in the characteristics. When you are elaborating on all that, you may perhaps conclude by saying that this Mesolithic is a springboard to the next stage in culture, that is Neolithic cultural age, where there was a transformation of man into a sedentary individual with full-fledged agriculture. That may be a positive kind of a contribution. That is where you will write about Gordon Child's comment on Indian Mesolithic and Neolithic. The other question, you're all good? You're all good? No? I hope so. This is a question on Neanderthal, and basically about, both the statements are about the controversies related to Neanderthal. All the while, the second half was in popular news. Now, the first part of it, such as classical and progressive Neanderthal, whether the distinction is still there or not, kind of a thing. So, your introduction has to talk about Neanderthal ever since the discovery had been a controversial fossil, either in terms of the typologies or in terms of its place in human evolutionary line. By saying that, we are giving these two controversies there. More amount of marks would go for this, so it may be like 1/3 and 2/3 kind of a distinction. So when it comes to the typologies of Neanderthal, two views still prevail. One of the views is there are two categories. Second one is categorization is futile, there is only one variant. When we are mentioning that, we have to explain how they are different and what are the similarities. You may perhaps give a table of comparison. You may perhaps give a table of comparison, and if possible, you can provide the small pictures of the skulls with proper labeling. Thirdly, when it comes to different controversies related to its position in human evolution, you can give the evolutionary pictures, the phylogenetic pictures of Neanderthal, whatever popular pictures are there, 3 or 4 popular pictures. And you will give the last picture as Skupin's picture, Skupin's evolutionary picture, where Neanderthal is called Homo neanderthalensis and not Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. So your debate now is Homo neanderthalensis versus Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, meaning you are trying to give the debate about whether Neanderthal was the ancestor of Homo sapiens or not. So that controversy you are trying to explain. I repeat, in evolutionary pictures, you will give good number of them, 3, 4 evolutionary pictures. You will end with the Skupin, who calls it Homo neanderthalensis and challenges Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, meaning he doesn't agree that Homo sapiens did not originate from Neanderthal, it had a different line of evolution. For this, the reasons you will have to explain. So 2 set of reasons why Homo sapiens and Neanderthal are contemporaries. Why they are called contemporaries. Second one is whether they fall in the same line of evolution or not. We have to give reasons for 2 things. One is why Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis are contemporaries, meaning where exactly the evidences have come, kind of things, common evidences, parallel evidences, and whether they and the claims for Homo neanderthalensis being Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and it is the ancestor of genus Homo sapiens sapiens. So those are the 2 arguments you will bring. And when you are giving these arguments, when it comes to this one, you will have to write about how Neanderthal had actually disappeared, leaving only modern man or Homo sapiens as the highest primate, only surviving hominin. This is the entire story, sir. So you have a table, you have a couple of small skulls to draw, you have to actually give the controversies, good lot of things, and hence writing in a pointed format in as quicker as possible kind of a thing, and conclude by saying that the controversy is still ripe because there is a divided opinion among the archaeologists. Coming to the next one here. This is a question about anthropometric measures of Carter and Heath model. Instead of using photographs of an individual, the other kinds of methods that they have used. So basically, it is a question about comparing the earlier models of somatotypes with this particular model, meaning there were two major ways of categorizing somatotypes. One was the metric methods, the other one was scopic methods. Most often, earlier to Carter's model, scopic methods were used in the somatotypes, the most popular being Sheldon's model. Sheldon's model actually had given us very important applications, whether in terms of sports or in various other kinds of applications, whether it is human growth studies and all of that. When I am saying this, your answer must talk about, see, there are comparisons. Out of the previous one, Sheldon was very, very popular. Why he was popular, you have to write. And from his study, I mean, the kind of criticisms from there, you will have to bring to Carter. When it comes to Carter, various kinds of measurements that he had taken, the 5 popular measurements that he had used, including the kind of stature and skin folds, various other things, body weight. And when we are speaking about all this, you also have to indicate here what kind of tools that he has used in order to measure the individuals. So 5-fold classification, 5-fold techniques that he had used, Carter, and what were the tools that he had used for the measurement. In fact, that is where the answer lies. When we are mentioning this, these are all the ones that are substituting the photographs that were used by Sheldon and others for categorization. I am using Sheldon here. You may perhaps write any other school that was used, any other method that was used to categorize the somatotypes. Sheldon I have picked up because that's the most popular one. And then perhaps here as well, you will have to write about the critique, the popular critiques, like, once again the sampling issue was there with him. And then in the measurement techniques, there were judgments involved, especially skin fold measurements. What or other kinds of criticisms, what age group he is taking, adults or children, which has to be the right age to consider for the somatotypes, kind of things. So basically, that is it. So it's a kind of a straight question, no arguments anywhere. This is a question largely about, so I am reading out the question for you. Discuss the historical and cultural context that led to superseding ethnocentrism with cultural relativism in anthropology. Basically, you are talking about the emergence of Boas. What had happened before him? and how he had changed the discipline of anthropology cultural relativistically. So all those drawbacks that had happened before him, all the drawbacks of the earlier schools, drawbacks of earlier schools. That's what it is, right? Historical and cultural context that led to the superseding ethnocentrism with cultural relativism. So whatever circumstances were there. Number 4 here, interpretations of Kula. I am naming 2 or 3 interpretations. Critically examine various anthropological interpretations. You may introduce the topic by hailing Malinowski for bringing out this phenomena through his participatory observations, which threw light on tribal exchange mechanisms, something like that. Various interpretations. His own interpretation is functionalistic. Structuralists actually, structural functionalists, their interpretation of how the Kula participants are organized. Thirdly, contemporary functionalist studies, where they explained change in the Kula ring itself, change, whatever change it is. Fifthly, there are also people from symbolic schools. They try to give their own interpretations. Maybe perhaps you can write this one as 5th and this as the 4th. So that with the extension of Kula in the current times to the proper economic exchanges, we can conclude that. So basically, the examiner looks for a comprehensive understanding of any topic, and how exactly your understanding of the subject is, how far you are able to apply the things to the need of the question rather than simply trying to write. So it is very easy for student to cover up the rest of the thing and then write only Kula ring. So you may perhaps give a grand ethnography of Kula ring, missing out the whole thing. No, he is not actually asking to explain Kula. He is trying to tell us who all have explained Kula, and that's how things are. So if only Malinowski we are keeping in mind, then you will start with him, end with him. That's how things are. Let us go to the other questions here. So in the section B of paper 1, the 5th question here, we see combinations here as well. Like, there is one question from applied anthropology, that is 5C, stages of human prenatal growth. It's quite a long time since the examiner had asked this prenatal development. On the other hand, you have the first part from the core part of the genetics. Then you have D and E coming from sociocultural anthropology. So once again, here also in the compulsory questions too, there is that experimentation done. So when we are comparing with section 1, question 1, I mean question 1 if you see, in the question 1 also, you have one from the applied physical, that is pedigree analysis, genetic counseling, and one from archaeology, the others from sociocultural anthropology. So there is a balance every time. He is not making you miss out on anything. You cannot be an expert in one and become an anthropologist like an American anthropologist. Now, coming to the other question. Basically, balanced polymorphism and transient polymorphism. You may introduce by talking about how in physical anthropology an emphasis is laid on human characteristics in terms of variability, even at the level of genetics. In the opening statement itself, you may talk about how the transient genetic polymorphism is a rarity in humans. Having said that, you may give the basic definition. You may give a small flow chart giving the categories of different polymorphisms. Mention that balanced polymorphism is the one which is mostly studied in anthropology, where certain very popular case studies are there, such as the study of sickle cell versus malaria, and the studies in North American populations, studies related to lactose consumption, non-consumption rather. So your answer has to talk about only the human element of polymorphism rather than trying to bring various other life forms. Because the question includes transient genetic polymorphism also. When the comparison comes, basically it is about the human he is trying to emphasize on, and hence. So your explanation, good lot of it goes here. Explaining the phenomena, you may perhaps include a picture there for giving a comparison. In fact, you can add the complete case studies related to blood groups also here, which was taken up by biological anthropologists under genetic polymorphism studies. There is one other question also on blood groups that is given this time. Now that is 8B. So all those three major blood group systems and HLA blood group system in specific, we'll come back on that. Now coming to the other question, 5B. Genetic imprinting or genome imprinting in human diseases. This is to be introduced as one of the very popular areas of study in anthropology from the cytogenetic perspective, and using pedigree method so there are combinations that are involved. Purpose is to help in genetic counseling. You will explain the phenomena. Phenomena, the meaning you are trying to explain, how one parental alleles get expressed or passed on more than once. The very popular study in anthropology is, other studies are also there. Angelman syndrome and Down syndrome. Basically, most of the answer goes in explaining those two phenomena. And you may say that this is basically to help in genetic correction or elimination in survival and reproduction. I repeat what I said. So this is a topic, this is a concept, genetic imprinting, that is generally made to use in anthropology in genetic counseling and genetic correction. Various tools that are incorporated are genome mapping, pedigree studies, and cytogenetic methods, and then you explain the phenomena, basically how there is a duplication of one of the parental genetic material and elimination of the others. So it may be Down syndrome or Angelman syndrome, you will be explaining them, and then you may perhaps. So that's also, and there is also good amount of work that is being done by which they are trying to conclude that there are increasing trends globally of incidences of genetic imprints, and there people are trying to figure out, because that is a secular trend, the reasons for such a phenomena. I repeat, studies have concluded that there is an increasing global trend of genetic imprints, and that is concluded as a secular phenomena. The reasons could be, primarily increasing maternal age. The other question is pretty direct one, wherein you will try to incorporate. So, prenatal development phases, you may perhaps incorporate the early phase and the late fetal phase, starting from the fertilization stage to the fetal development, how different organs have come into picture, at what age, what happens, and kind of things. That's not necessary though, that would help. the four major phases. You have the other question here. So basically, the two phases you will incorporate, early fetal phase and the late phase, how exactly the organs emerge and how they grow, kind of. Those are the three people. Your answer must mention that shaman, sorcerer, medicine man, and a priest, though priest is not given, indicate an evolutionary pattern of emergence of different magico-religious functionaries that can form your introduction. So your answer should have two parts here, sir. One is about evolution, second one is about distinction. So in the evolution, trends in evolution you can explain. When you are explaining trends itself as a part of that, you may perhaps give the characteristics of each of them with examples. So what a shaman is, who is actually a culmination of all the political, religious and medicinal functions, whereas sorcerers, medicine man, they indicate the later evolutions where distinction is there based on their functionality, ultimately culminating into a priest. Okay? You may perhaps indicate people like Fraser, who had clearly distinguished among them, also Malinowski, who worked among such kind of a phenomenon. As far as functions are concerned, you may perhaps give a table or give pointers there followed by examples. Household and domestic group. Household, domestic group. Family, household, domestic groups were actually studied by people like Morgan, who tried to define. Though family is not given in this question, you will have to begin with family, because on the basis of family, your answer should say that household and domestic group, these are nothing but extensions of family. They are nothing but extensions of family, or they may be seen as variants. They may be seen as variants of family. When you explain what family is, talk about household examples, you can give domestic group examples like patrilateral extended family, matrilateral extended family. Domestic group may be, in terms of not having a clear-cut nature of the connection, and they may be affinal, they may be consanguineous, they may be non-kin based, kind of thing. Nothing controversial, nothing kind of, it's simply trying to explain the meaning of the terms. If you could remember, you may perhaps add the name of the article, family, household, domestic group, produced by Morgan. Let us quickly get into the other ones. So, 6A, that is discuss mechanism of social control in different kinds of political systems. The question is about different political systems. Second one is social control mechanism. So, primarily it is about political systems. So, you may perhaps so in this process of evolution, your first paragraph should talk about the trends in the evolution in general and about social control mechanisms in particular. In social control mechanisms, a movement from non-centralized, non-state entities to centralized entities. You may elaborate on the existence of informal and formal social control mechanisms, what varieties of centralized and non-centralized ones exist at both the ends, in doing so, you are actually talking about explaining various institutions that may be unifying across cultures, that may be specially used by indigenous communities. Like here you can give the examples of northeastern societies of India that have customary laws. So, in that process you may perhaps talk about various things like existence of mechanisms like maybe potlatches, or how the formal electoral mechanisms would come democratic and post-democratic entities, or how the emergence of autocracies, how exactly the chiefdoms are pompously exhibiting the kind of social control mechanisms. Everywhere, I mean, this is a question that is filled with good lot of examples, starting from band to various other entities. Without examples, you cannot actually attempt this question. So that strength of examples is mandatory. This is a question about you may start by WHO's own statement about increasing lifestyle diseases. And hence coming up with distinguishable Millennium Development Goals for lifestyle diseases otherwise they're termed as NCDs. So you may begin with that. By WHO itself define health. And under that you may perhaps talk about how WHO had brought in the discussion of lifestyle diseases, the fourfold classification. About these, the answer should talk about justify your answer with suitable examples. How class-based distinction is reduced, how gender or sex-based distinction is coming down, and occasionally we also see age-based distinction in the occurrence of them also coming down. He says examples, that is the catch, of course. So generally it is, and also one other major comparison you can give is developing and developed countries distinction also coming down. So how at one point of time cancers, smoking, alcoholism, etc. are considered to be upper class things, or male-centered problems, or adult-centered problems, or developed countries issues. Now things starting to change, and that's how it is. So you can give several studies, Indian obesity studies, African Samoan obesity studies, or maybe perhaps the class-wise distinction reducing. You have to also give reasons for such kind of a reduction. You may perhaps say that because of this, these are the universal trends now. They are not restricted to anything especially, and that is where you are justifying with your examples. You're all good? Because you're still in the process of learning the course. If at all you are finding it difficult to continue, you may leave. I don't have a problem. బలవంతంగా నేనేది కొట్టి కూర్చోబెట్టట్లేదండి. మీకు కూర్చోగలిగినంతసేపు, మీకు ఓపిక ఉన్నంతసేపు కూర్చోవచ్చండి. ఆ తర్వాత అలాంటి ఇప్పుడు మొత్తం అందరూ వెళ్ళిపోతారా? I know you do that. You won't do that. మా మనసులో మాట ఎలా తెలిసిపోయిందో అనుకుంటున్నారు కదా, నాకు తెలుసు. Theoretically evaluate the reasons of reduction in age at menarche in human females over successive generations. So you may introduce by talking about demographic anthropology. demographic anthropology in the working of menarche and menopause, identifying certain secular trends such as this one. In the special context of India, conventional studies were there. I am naming a few studies. Studies on changing menarche. And whenever you are writing these studies, you will have to give the complete case, sir. Meaning what is the sample, what is the population that is studied, whether it is caste based, tribal population or class based study, urban, rural study, etc. So I will try to write that also. Majumdar, you have people like Robinson, various other Indian writers. And when you are trying to mention, you will have to give the sample size which group of population, which segment of population was studied, and what is the conclusion, what is the result of the study. At that point of time, they gave the reasons as conclusions. So the equations they considered some like rural urban comparisons, tribe versus caste comparisons, upper caste versus lower caste comparisons, and then within tribes also plains tribes versus hill tribes comparisons. Kind of whenever, whichever study had considered that, you can bring those. And based on that, their conclusions they have given, like hill terrain Y, lower caste Y, kind of. Now your answer must talk about, these were the conventional studies conducted with the limited samples, not that there is no error with the sample and all, with that sample. Now we can see that there has been definitely a lack of enough number of studies in this particular area. There is a dearth of studies, but in spite of that, the general observation has been the emergence of a uniform trend. That uniform trend can be attributed to certain changes that are coming up in the lifestyle, maybe nutritional changes, habitat changes. So various other lifestyle changes that are occurring, because of which generation after generation fall in the monarchical age seems to be a secular trend that is emerging among all the classes and among all the castes or tribe or caste kind of groups. That is how it has to be concluded. But then your study has to, your answer has to give at least 4 or 5 major case studies, then your answer would be complete. And see, when we are saying that in the contemporary times there is a dearth and then there are certain trends identified, etc., based on how you are actually presenting your content, you may give the statistics that are available from ICMR, that is a major source that we are using now, or WHO. When it comes to India, ICMR we are generally using, or maybe National Family and Health Survey 2012-2005, that is where we have some kind of information about these trends. Those we may perhaps use as contemporary ones. And coming to 7A. Evolutionary forces creating human diversity. This is actually a subject matter in anthropogenetics, where diversity in human population is actually studied. So, the other field that goes well with this is population genetics, demographic or population genetics. You may perhaps, so the answer is about various concepts which I can say these are the evolutionary mechanisms or forces such as genetic drift, isolation, migration, mate selection, assortative mating with a cultural variable. I repeat, concepts such as genetic drift, isolation, migration, mate selection, assortative mating with cultural variability. So, these are the different phenomena and several other population genetic concepts. These are should and must be incorporated in your answer, and how these actually have been instrumental in changing genetic frequency of man. Genetic frequency in the human societies. This is one. What I see is the question can be answered in two parts, sir, actually. So, one kind of a human diversity is within the human species, how diversity of the genetic matter is. That is what is mentioned here in this particular explanation. Another kind of a concept which can be a part of this answer is how the racial diversity is emerging. That could be one other mechanism. So, actually speaking, anthropogenetics and population genetics clearly indicate them. I mean, any conventional book on population genetics mentions these as evolutionary processes or evolutionary forces bringing human diversity. But then maybe perhaps according to my idea, you may also incorporate how the racial diversity is emerging because of various forces, because of migration to various ecological situations or environmental conditions. So, race formation because of environmental influence or migration of the populations into particular environmental conditions can also be a part of studying human diversity, because in the physical anthropology when we talk about human diversity, diversity at the level of the species, diversity at the level of intra-species diversity. So, racial as well as gene pool diversity, these two are generally studied. So, maybe perhaps both have to be incorporated in that answer. I mean, that is how I look at the question. Nevertheless, when I spoke to some of our students, they have stick to this one, but मेरे ख्याल में ऐसा होना चाहिए कि racial diversity also should be incorporated, but we will have to see how the examiner will look at it, kind of. This is where I found the question slightly dicey. I mean, maybe perhaps it could have been much more clearer. Then we have the other question, historical development of the fieldwork tradition in anthropology. So because that is a 15 marker, you may introduce by mentioning fieldwork as the basic characteristic feature of the discipline of anthropology in order to bring the empirical nature to the study, and say that this fieldwork, which is a hallmark of the discipline, itself was evolving, and it is still evolving. Through, you can actually bring various trends. Trends in terms of methodology, trends in terms of techniques, in terms of drawing conclusions. So how one was going from secondary to primary to tertiary to quaternary kind of data collection, employing different kinds of ethnographic methods, how one was going from participatory to non-participatory to back, kind of things. Your answer actually should, because he is talking about fieldwork tradition anthropology till the recent times. So from classical evolutionary time to Malinowski and Bowa's time to symbolism to postmodern to now postmodern. So in the postmodern, we may talk about the recent emergence of fields like Facebook anthropology. So you will end on that. 7C is a direct question. But then when you are having 3 different people, you try to bring the commonalities between them and the distinctions between them. How all 3 are neo-evolutionists and what are the individual strengths or weaknesses. So, properly speaking, I mean it's a question where for each thinker 5 marks if he is awarding, or maybe 4 marks for each thinker, 3 marks for the kind of conclusions that you are drawing. You have 8 contemporary population problems in the light of various socio-cultural demographic theories. The popular theories that should and must go in the writing of the answer, you would start with Malthus theory. which is actually the earliest socio-economic theory, and you should be talking about these as either the ones supporting Malthus or opposing his ideas on the interconnection between food supplies, resource supplies, and population. Having said that, each of these theories we will have to bring to what are the current population problems and how those explanations can help. So maybe perhaps, for example, if you are taking social capillarity theory of Dumont, you would explain the theory in one liner, and you will have to talk about which contemporary problem he is trying to address, meaning he is trying to talk about how development orientedness at the level of family with the small family norm was dealt with. Basically, the idea behind this question is how the theories can help solve the contemporary demographic problems, how the theories can help finding an answer to the contemporary demographic problems. Say, for example, we speak about optimum population theory, that is the very popular one, Saunders' optimum population theory. And in fact, your answer may end with that theory of optimum theory. All these theories have one kind of a problem or the other being dealt with from the issues of demography. But then when it comes to Saunders, he is trying to conclude it by saying that the effort of the demographers, of the administrators or the governments or the population in general is to attain that optimum level of population where the resources can actually match with the requirement of the population. And when we are saying this, your conclusion should talk about optimum is a relative one, and then that has been a difficulty, mathematical difficulty in arriving at the optimum population. With that, you may perhaps conclude by saying that the kind of problems that are emerging have been changing from time to time, but ultimately numbers and the resource crunch that has been there right from the beginning, and it is continuing. And hence, see, basically I am somebody who go by Malthus. You may not be somebody who is accepting Malthusian idea. Malthusian idea as it is, not as it is, but then we appreciate. I appreciate that it may not be geometric or arithmetic proportion in which the growth happens, but then there is definitely a disproportion in the way food supplies are increasing and the populations are increasing. So with a modification, Malthus theory is still valid. All the others are actually substantiation of that theory in finding solutions to different problems. The problem that was found by the students was that they were readily explaining all the theories. I mean, whoever were choosing, they were explaining all the theories, forgetting that key word, that is, I am reading out, it is not typed there, the contemporary population problems in the light of various socio-cultural demographic theories. So, basically it is the contemporary problems that they are not actually addressing, that they should have addressed, because each theory is coming up with a solution or with a problem from the population that it is addressing, that you will have to. So, even if you are not concluding based on optimum population theory, etc., the expectation is that for these major theories, you will have to write which is the problem they are trying to address. And right from the beginning, every time when I speak about demography related topics, I always make it a point that students learn the theories. These 9-10 theories they will have to learn, I mean including Malthus, the 10 theories that you will have to learn, they are mandatory actually. I mean this year or next year, whenever it is. This is only one half of it. The question is not still about biological demographic theories. That is one other 7-8 theories are there. That's a jumbo feast for the student. You will have to do it. Are there? have this last question there. Anthropological knowledge of the human body may be used in designing equipments and articles of human. That is a direct question. Basically, the question is about the combination of anthropometry and ergonomics. And so your answer must begin with that. Anthropological knowledge about human body is nothing but anthropometry that is basically used to ensure ergonomic applications, number one. Secondly, in order to have, of course, here itself you have all the various things incorporated, efficiency or, kind of manufacturing for specific populations, meaning incorporating variability based on gender, based on the race, ethnic group, etc. So, on those lines you are actually writing your introduction. From your syllabus only you take defense applications, sports applications, industrial applications, generally those three fields. We have umpteen number of examples for each of them. So basically here we are writing can anthropometric studies here we are using for trade in defense equipment, for which designing specifically is important. Here for the proper generation of the output, one has to give importance to ergonomic works. So if at all proper case studies are incorporated, so that is the best kind of a question. Take a 5 minutes break, we'll reassemble. 5 minutes break, Japama. ఏం బ్యాగులు పట్టుకుని నిలబడ్డారు? స్టార్ట్ అమ్మా. Thank you. I know it's quite late in the evening. What we will do is, I'll try to give the basic, a basic structure of the questions. So that detailed explanation, maybe I would have one more session for detailed explanation. Maybe I'll try to, once again upload on the YouTube. But then, पहले अभी इसका जो ritual है वो complete करेंगे. May not be very elaborate, but old habits die hard. So, but let's see how it will be. Pit dwellers. So basically, this is a question about. Long time back, there was one question of this region. The question was about Burzahom. This is once again a repetition of that question. Nevertheless, what I expect from you for the exam is give at least 5 to 10 sites that are Neolithic sites of Kashmir, especially Neolithic sites of Kashmir, and from there pick up Burzahom as the signature site where pit dwelling populations were found. So 5-10 sites you will take, and all those people who have studied, to begin with the Cambridge studies, Yale Cambridge studies, and various other thinkers, good number of them. At least 7-8 people are there who worked in the Neolithic of Jammu and Kashmir. All those names have to come, all those sites have to come. So there has to be a table giving all those facts. I mean, the region who had studied, which team it was, and if possible, which year also. I mean, that gives a very beautiful kind of a answer. And after that, you say that Burzahom is the signature site, you write the features of Burzahom. Your conclusion will be, thanks. Your conclusion will be that, that Kashmir has presented a beautiful, evidence of Neolithic cultures of India, and that is proved by all those evidences that are shown, kind of. So it is not simply a Burzahom related question, but all the sites put together. I really loved the way he has framed the second and third questions, Varna and Dharma, Varna and Buddhism, Dharma versus religion. That is where I say that the place where a student stops, that is from where UPSC starts thinking. I mean, so a student was saying, the moment he saw these questions, he was so impressed by UPSC. For a second, he forgot that he was in the exam, and then he caught up the senses and he started writing. And I mean, that's the kind of a vibe UPSC actually sends. Varna and Buddhism. You say that the crux of this is the emergence of Buddhism. The emergence of Buddhism was against the signature characteristic of Hinduism, that was caste. But when it comes to Varna, two opinions exist in Buddhism. One is the traditional literature looks Varna as a horizontal plane. In the contemporary one, Varna is replaced by caste. So, this is the literary thing, this is a cultural thing. So, basically the question is not simply about Varna, it is about the Varna and caste equation in Buddhism. To begin with, it came against caste, but Varna was mentioned in its literature, where Varna was seen as something that was attainable. I mean, the early kind of Rigvedic Varna style, but then over a period of time we see Varna within Buddhism also getting transformed into caste, and now Buddhism is exhibiting the caste phenomena. You can give the studies there with the examples of how many castes we find in different sects of Buddhism. Mahayanism, how many castes are there? Hinduism, how many castes are there? So in a contemporary sense, dharma or righteousness can be attributed to all religions. In the that's the conclusion actually with which you are starting your answer. In the contemporary sense, dharma or righteousness can be attributed to all religions. Here you have to bring home a point that dharma cannot be considered as the Hindu philosophy alone. It is a part of Sanatana Dharma and hence can be extended to all the belief systems of the subcontinent or all the belief systems of the world. I mean, subcontinent has to definitely come. Take care. And that is how Sanatana Dharma and Dharma interconnections are. So you can actually, so the next step is that Dharma is not simply a Hindu concept, Hindu philosophical thing. This can be equally applied to all aspects, to all belief systems of the subcontinent. This is because of the multicultural existence of Indian society, where dharma has to rule every walk of life. With a goal that is disposed for every belief system in its own way. Safeguards of linguistic minorities, I think those articles you will have to memorize. The 6-7 articles are there for linguistic minorities and linguistic minorities commission, and that's all fact oriented thing. So, but then you will have to incorporate in the introduction the need for having such safeguards for linguistic minorities. So you start with the need to have the safeguards. That is how language houses entire culture, entire knowledge associated with those people. Therefore, there is a need to preserve the languages and hence the safeguards. Having said that, list the articles. Write about the commission. We have the other question. Both of them or mechanisms of social change. As Yoginder Singh says, the ones that are external processes of social change in Indian society. Basically, the question talks about the difference in the meaning and scope of them. So westernization, you have to talk about Srinivas, in which sense he had defined, and what are the tools associated with westernization. When it comes to modernization, you bring in the scientific endeavor, scientific spirit that distinguishes it from westernization. Your answer has to talk about where exactly they coincide and where they diverge from one another. I repeat, both are the mechanisms of social change. In terms of Yoginder Singh, you write his book, these are the external processes. And these concepts, westernization highlighted, studied, defined by Srinivas, the tools that are involved, whether that is administration, various other things. And modernization is something to do with scientific temper. And there you will have to talk about how these two can be a combination, something that is westernization, to what extent it is modernization also. Can there be modernization without westernization? In the process where modernization without westernization, you may perhaps bring in particular kinds of Sanskritization also. Okay. And it's not simply this. We are continuing to incorporate Yoginder Singh's writings, how modernization tools are, what kind of tools of modernization are there. It is basically scientific temper he's talking about, not exactly science and technological developments alone, scientific temper, and hence for him there can be a modernization through the other belief systems. That is where he talks about Christianity as a tool of modernization or Islam as a tool of modernization. So that is where he is trying to look at what are all the tools of modernization for him. Scientific temper, the one that brings scientific temper, function as tools, not simply science and technological developments alone. And that's where it is. And you will have to conclude by saying that social change in modern India, according to Srinivas, is an unending process with increasing scientific temper, kind of. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to do this for you. Some of you are already our students, for others also. Regarding Iravati Karve, in our book of Indian society, we have a very long discussion about the lady, Iravati Karve and production of an Indian anthropology, 184. This is a very elaborately dealt with article about Mrs. Karve. Okay. Nevertheless, I'll give you some of the things that should go into your answer. And the question also is teasing you. Make a special mention of a literary contribution. So 5 marks will be there for this particular part. And if at all the student has not memorized the list of the books, kind of. So you may be memorizing Srinivas or Majumdar's, Vidyarthi's books, and then you were showing lesser importance to the lady there. And if that is the case, the feminist Iravati Karve comes up in the exam and snatches your 5 marks, as simple as it is. So what a female anthropologist can do is affect your marks. So Karve's, anyway, list of books, etc., you would see there. her contributions, various fields. Sir, you may begin with her feminist anthropology orientation itself, her contributions to feminist anthropology, meaning that stamp of feminist anthropology was there in every aspect that she was studying. So her contributions to archaeology, study of institution of family, institutions of kinship, epics and mythology, kind of thing. So you have to go into every aspect and you will be writing about it. And in that article, there was one very beautiful conclusion made. I am reading out that line for you so that because we started with feminism, right? So you have Heimendorf, who wrote about her, and several other people. There is one statement. So she writes at one place, for a woman who was educated in India and abroad, who had reached the heights of professional achievements, to write addressing her husband, she wrote addressing her husband, right in quotes, I place my head on your feet and ask for your blessing. It is an achievement that can be equated by few scholars as feminist or not a feminist. As simple as it is. I mean, that shows the depth of her tradition at the same time. So it is actually, she was trying to lay a mechanism or lay a blueprint of how a feminist in general can be and how a feminist anthropologist can be. So culturally what, and then philosophically or academically what, whether there can be a distinction, there can be a feminist at the same time, there can be a respectful relationship with one's own family, because after all she was writing about her family and kinship kind of a thing. Maybe that emotional tinge, if it is there, the answer would be very beautiful. And I love this question. 2B, what are the arguments of excluding Narmada man? You have to start your answer by saying that Narmada man has always been claimed proudly as the evidence of human evolution, evidence of human biological evolution, earlier to Homo sapiens whatsoever. So Narmada man has been an evidence of, because that was one of the very few fossil evidences that we had found. Now the problems. Question is on problems. Problems, 15 marks. Major problem is the sample, the specimen. So your answer is actually describing the specimen, the upper part of the skull, and lack of evidence of any other kind of evidences, whether that is long bones, femur, or anything for that matter, or maybe. So basically it is the description about the sample. And then not simply this, about inability to find any other evidences in the rest of the subcontinent. And that's how things are. So everything revolves around this. But then don't be disappointed. On these claims, people are actually challenging. But Indian archaeology is still hopeful to establish Narmada man as Homo erectus. Don't give up hope. And to see that is Dr. Ambedkar's arguments on origin of Indian caste system. I think it is better you begin with mentioning Ghurye. Ghurye's characteristics of caste system were in a way influenced by Dr. Ambedkar's descriptions of caste writings. And apart from Ghurye, your answer actually is an explanation of the book Annihilation of Caste. That is where Dr. Ambedkar was talking about caste origins. Origins primarily based in occupation, idea of purity, and idea of impurity, and hence untouchability. So various aspects that he is talking about. And you also indicate in your answer how and what to do with caste. Because in the book itself, the book's title itself says Annihilation of Caste. So how exactly such kind of evils of the caste can be handled. So he's talking about elimination of such a system, and how exactly elimination is possible. And maybe perhaps, either you are starting with Ghurye. At another way of beginning your answer can be Ambedkar's writings on caste system establishes him as a prominent anthropologist on Indian studies. With that you can begin. And towards the end you may add Ghurye. So, I mean, either this or that. But Ghurye has to be there. Ambedkar as an anthropologist should be there. Then this is one very highly scoring question, sir. Megalithic burials, Dubé, and you have Risley. Beautiful question. Critical appraisal of megalithic tradition in India with special reference to Northeast. Now, megalithic tradition of India has actually been studied by people like Gordon Child, and more prominently by Heimendorf, where the categorization has been the living megaliths and South Indian megaliths. Among the living megaliths, the prominent ones are northeastern traditions of megaliths. This is your introduction. Your answer will be describing the different types of megaliths. Say, for example, you are explaining dolmen. You explain in a statement, you give a picture, and because the question is about Northeast, the Northeast tribes that are still practicing. So you can go on doing that. Various examples, and then type, definition, picture, the tribes that are practicing. You need not worry much about elaborate explanations. Dolmens, cysts, rock cut caves, any such other entities. You have things like menhirs, alignments, so on and so forth. The conclusion can be, the question is on Northeast. So the conclusion can be like the entire Northeast, that's a vibrant culture with several modifications that have happened. So the tribal has moved towards, in several ways, in several regions through Christianity, to Buddhism, to Hinduism, etc. In spite of these, there are traditions of megaliths still continuing in several places of the Northeast. When I'm mentioning this, in the last statement also you will have to mention the tribes where still megalithic burials are being taken up. I repeat my statement. Your conclusion can be that the northeastern tradition, which has been vibrant, had experienced a modification through culture contact towards Christianization, Buddhism or Hinduization, etc. But megalithic burial practice is still continuing in certain ways in some tribes such as so and so. Done? I know so many blanks are there, but Mr. Dubey, village studies. You may begin with his books. Directly you may start with his books that reflect the connect with village studies. And among the village studies, his focus on political, economic aspects, his research methodologies, meaning, for example, the issue of dominant castes, how he tried to distinguish, how he tried to critique M.N. Srinivas, the interplay of political and economic systems, how exactly resource allocations are linked to caste, kind of things. In the research methodologies, primary source of information, non-participant observation, participatory rural appraisal, kind of things. And also you may dwell a bit into what other things he dealt with, all the nitty-gritties, rituals and various things. Your next question, that is 3C. What, may I go? May I go? About Risley, basically you will have to talk about what kind of metric methods he has used and what are the criteria he considered. What are the criteria he considered, and how about the sample? Based on these, he tried to draw conclusions about the 7 popular types. Now, what you try to do is, you focus more on the criticism, picking up each of the category, rather than trying to describe each of the racial type. So, in the criticism, for example, if any Turco-Iranian type is there, where head form is given in a particular manner, Guha says, no, it is wrong. Those things you will have to highlight. And I mean, that's how things are. Each of the criteria you pick up and you try to incorporate that, see, because of the kind of a smaller sample or extrapolation or not finding diversities within kind of criticisms, all that. you will have to bring in. And so you are not actually describing each of the racial types, but you are trying to use each racial type for highlighting the criticisms or the mistakes that he had done in his work, starting from sampling to conclusions that he was making without considering the diversities. In fact, the question is very good. Globalization on one hand has provided opportunities, and on the other hand throws challenges to Indian villages. So basically that is a topic in your syllabus, globalization impact on Indian village. The whole lot of agrarian social structure studies. So basically one is agrarian social structure being studied. Second one is occupational shift, urbanization, urbanism, changing agrarian policies. So this is more like a sociology answer because of mainstream government's policies, how the caste equations are changing due to the role of MNCs. Most of your answer is in the connection of MNC, agrarian policies and agrarian social structure. Everything revolves around the MNC there. Multinational corporations are seen to be the symbols of globalization through which the Indian village seems to have changed at different levels, at the social structure level, at the movement towards urbanism and urbanization level, and how the importance of the caste, importance of land allocations are changing, kind of. And it is here the works of people like Andhri Bettelli have to be incorporated in your answer, because Bettelli had worked especially on Indian villages, and he also incorporated globalization related tendencies on this. And another person whom you can incorporate in these writings is R.C. Verma. R.C. Verma in his book Indian Tribes Through Ages, apart from the Dalits, apart from the tribal communities, he was also writing on how the deprivation of the mainstream villages due to MNCs and industrialization, kind of. So a couple of thinkers, they come there. Iravati Karve also had to talk about globalization. We have the other one here, 4B, describe briefly proto-history of Gujarat. So Gujarat has got huge number of sites. When he talks about international trade, coastal sites seem to be the significant ones. So Lothal, Dholavira especially, at least 4 sites you pick up. Map mein zyada sites dena. Show in the map not less than 10 sites, so that you are showing to the examiner, I know so much. You show the sites, but you write about 4 major sites, Lothal specifically, international trade, and hence your seaport, coastal sites have to be brought in, evidences of imported goods that have to come in, and I think that should suffice. By the time you are giving the map and writing the list of the things, who has discovered and what has been discovered, examiner is pretty happy, not to worry much. And so basically, proto-history is IVC, I think that is clear, right? Proto-history is nothing but Indus Valley sites we are writing about. Many people, if you do not know the meaning of proto-history, you are caught. Proto-history is Indus Valley sites, Indus Valley civilization. And then indigenization of Christianity. So this is another kind of a diffusion. Indigenization of Christianity in India. So basically how Christianity got assimilated into Indian society, how Christianity got the Indian characteristics. So to say, cultural transformation of Christianity, attainment of, if not anything else, caste by Christianity. It's that. I mean, that is in a way an experiment trying to ask question like that instead of asking straight. Actually, this fifth question, 5A, regionalism as an opportunity and a threat to national integration, this in a way was replicated elsewhere. There is one question about 8A, if you could see, 8A. This is not written here. 8A, compare the nature of tribal movements between northeast and central India. Briefly mention the current status of existing tribal movements in these regions. So basically, there is a connect between them. Regionalism as an opportunity and threat to national integration. Opportunity and threat. So basically, here the question is talking about how regionalism is giving rise to subnationalism. Subnationalism and giving rise to secessionist movements. So that is where specific questions, I think specific examples the examiner is looking for, like Greater Nagalim kind of secessionist movements. And hence, this is in a way giving rise to a new kind of national identity. So from that side, if you see, it is an opportunity to work towards their own subnational tendencies. On the other hand, regionalism is a threat to national integration. When we say this, the best way of doing things is across the country you try to picture out at least those 4 or 5 regional movements. Vidarbha ho gaya ya kuch aur bhi movement ho gaya. So you can actually bring down in each region. So every region is contributing to these regionalistic movements. So you can actually pick up those and try to say that that is how it is a threat to national integration kind of. So on the one hand, it gives a cultural identity, an opportunity to bring out one's own cultural identity. On the other hand, it also threatens the uniformity of. For these, unfortunately, we do not have specific thinkers to quote, as far as these studies are concerned. So mostly these are being done by organizations like Anthropological Survey of India. So you may perhaps use Anthropological Survey of India's write-ups only, but then see, when it comes to northeastern region, for northeastern movements, there are good number of books that are published. So you may perhaps pick up books, titles of the books from there, like national integration related books by Professor Subba and various others. You may perhaps look into those literatures and try to incorporate here. Otherwise, we also have one publication, Tribal Cultures in India by Surjit Sinha. That is also one book which talks about regionalism, nationalism, etc. So those have to be quoted. There is this other question, issues of tribal agricultural laborers. Issues of tribal agricultural laborers, they have been discussed from times immemorial, starting from Vidyarthi's time, and after that also people have been writing. Basically, there are two phenomena. One is peasantization. The second one is depeasantization. These are the two major phenomena that are found out by Vidyarthi. Peasantization is where non-agricultural tribes are pushed towards agriculture, either as agricultural laborers, most often as agricultural laborers. You can give the examples how people are taken as indentured laborers into coffee, tea plantations, etc. That is one, that's a continuing phenomena. Depeasantization is where people like small farming communities or shifting cultivators are actually thrown out of their occupation, forced into because of capturing, because of ban of shifting cultivation, and the agriculture becoming a difficult one to continue with. People are getting into industrialized world and kind of tendencies. So this is industry driven thing. This is commercialization of agriculture driven thing. This is one. There could be other examples also where foraging communities are there who are pushed towards agriculture. So that may be shifting cultivation, settled agriculture. Everywhere examples are must. For every reference that you are giving, examples are existing. Examples are must. So issues of tribal agricultural laborers. One other problem that you may incorporate here is Forest Rights Act. That is one, Forest Rights Act, that had been silent, about the tribes who are having community assets. Individual assets they are talking about. They are not talking about people who are having community assets. It is not talking about protection of the agricultural laborers, tribal agricultural laborers. It is silent on that particular act. So the later part of your answer, the concluding part, can be based on Forest Rights Act and how it had been aggravating the problems of tribal agricultural labor. So are you okay? Are you okay with that answer? No? You should be. No choice. And yeah, problems of nomadic and semi-nomadic groups. Major problems of nomadic and semi-nomadic groups. I want you to answer this in two ways. Of course, you will name them based on their occupation, whether they are pastoral, artisan tribes, etc. Name them and map them. This is one exercise, sideline exercise that is going on. On the other side, you will have, you would categorize them. You would categorize them into what were the traditional problems and problems under the current welfare norms. Meaning, what are the provisions government is now giving for the welfare of nomadic and semi-nomadic groups. There are certain traditional problems. In order to deal with them, government had come up with the establishment of a commission, establishment of good list of programs aiming at them. But then what are the problems? So direct answer is there in Ministry of Tribal Affairs Ministry. You need not worry. And you have the other one. ये तो direct question हो गया. 5th schedule areas, what is the role of the governor? Austro-Asiatic languages थोड़ा सा इसमें problem ये है कि content आपको देखना पड़ेगा. Austro-Asiatic language, see whenever there is a problem in such kind of questions, you either get a comparative study. एक हो गया Austro-Asiatic languages, you start from Grierson, you mention what percentage of population is speaking, which are the groups that are speaking, where exactly they are located. एक छोटा सा map बनेगा. I know many questions I am saying map, but that is mandatory. आपको लगता हो कि हर चीज़ में मैप कहाँ से डालें, but your hand should be used to. आपको आंसर लिखने कुछ नहीं आ रहा है तो मैप ही डाल रहा है. kind of a thing. पहले map डालो फिर बाद में सोचो क्या लिखना है kind of. And that's how things are. अगर fossils में लिख रहे हो तो पहले किसी का भी skull डाल दो, बाद में labeling का बन जाएगा kind of a thing. You know? ऐसा. And how many languages he found Grierson, and how the second linguistic survey had spoken about. अगर second linguistic survey आप लिख रहे हो तो this particular question can match to the required limit of the words. I'm so sorry for the quick run. I'm not like this, but kind of. बच्चों को भूख लग रही है, अभी थोड़ी देर में रोना शुरू करेंगे, मम्मा खाना खिलाओ करके. मेरा बच्चा भी वेट कर रहा है, but still. Yeah, there is this question about the objectives of integrated tribal development program. Ministry talks about four major objectives. Four major objectives. एक तो development वाला हो गया, and then basic infrastructure facilities हो गए, and participation of them in the administrative activities with the kind of skills that we will have to be developing. ये question इसलिए पूछा गया शायद कि after a long time there was a review of ITDA related programs that had happened. Review started in 2018 only. So one after the other so many reports have come. So I think in the light of those, हम क्या करेंगे ना कि when we upload this video on the YouTube, we will try to add certain links in the description so that you know these program links can be provided to you. आप उसमें से ले सकते हो चीज़ को. And there are these questions, sir. Explain how British policies impacted the major resources of the tribals. ये तो generic question नहीं हुआ. This is actually a specific question. British policies, how they have impacted major resources of the tribals. So basically you are talking about, in spite of the fact that isolationism was in place, colonialism was at the heart of their ideology. That is how the question has to be looked at. Explain how British policies impacted major resources of the tribals. Apart from this, so एक हो गया isolationism वाला. Second thing is the forest policies. Forest policies. How forest policies started declaring certain forest wealth as the property of the government, like teak as a property of the British government, and depriving them of various things. So एक हो गया. So most of the forest policies that have emerged in the British times gradually had removed the rights. वो वाला description है. Second thing is they starting with the efforts of industrialization and mining activities that also had led to displacement of them or occupational shift among them. So that is one. So basically the colonialist tendency, I mean जहाँ पर भी आपको मौका मिले उसको आप current trend से you should be adding that, you know, this is still continuing phenomena kind of a thing. So these are some of them. And yeah, you may perhaps also talk about infrastructural projects like linear infrastructural projects, roads, railway lines, etc. in the remote tribal hilly areas. How exactly displacement had happened and culture contact emerging kind of. So four major things connect to the present. Everywhere enough examples are there. और वो सारे examples आपको ये book में मैंने दिया है. Tribal anthropology. This is not my picture, though it looks like me. నవ్వుతారు. సో నాలాగా ఉంది కదా. It is. I'm so sorry. Yeah, one more is that 7A. Ghuriye Elvin approach towards tribal populations. What are the policies of the government of India towards Indian tribal populations? So basically, this is a debate about approach to tribals. Your introduction can be about, can be on these lines. The approach of the mainstream and the government towards the tribals has always been a bone of contention. Even today, it's a bone of contention, how to deal with the tribes and how to approach the tribes. And such a debate formally started with Ghurye and Elwin, who had from time to time provided their approach of isolationism, that is National Park's approach, that's what you are going to talk about, which eventually culminated into integrationalism, and hence emerged the idea of tribal Panchashil. Did you get the stream? Did you get the thing? So we are actually starting by saying that how to approach tribals either physically or in terms of development, that has always been a bone of contention. Earliest people who started with this kind of a discussion was Elwin and him, who had given the idea of isolationism. There we are writing about the national parks approach, and that was weighed against assimilationism and finally culminated into integrationalism. That reflected the Nehruvian approach of tribal Panchashil. ठीक है, यहाँ तक first part का हो गया. And then based on tribal Panchashil, what kind of governmental initiatives Government of India had taken up towards the tribal population. So in those 5 major principles that they are talking about, say for example, there has to be a self-governance, decision making kind of a thing. How exactly tribal councils emerged in particular places, not in all the regions, but tribal councils have emerged. They have been put to practice, and then how their priorities are assessed. For their priorities to be assessed, how the governor is actually given more powers, whether it is actually theoretically giving or practically giving. So those 5 entities that you are writing about in tribal Panchashil, we will have to pick up each one of them, and against that you should be writing. So when you are writing tribal Panchashil, rule number 1, for which what did government do? Rule number 2, for what did government do? That has to be the approach of writing your answer. Issues and solutions related to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India. Both are Dalits, categorized as Dalits. Both are oppressed, but then how different they are. How different in terms of their past and present. So their issues are related to their past and present, and hence their solutions also. Differential solutions are given because they have different situations. And hence Constitution had come up with different solutions. I mean, there are certain common provisions that are common, provisions that are different. Okay, I repeat. Both are categorized as Dalits, but they are different. Different in terms of their past and present. How they were different, you should be writing. Okay. And hence, government has actually come up with constitutional provisions. There are certain common provisions, certain distinguishable different provisions. Apart from that, there was also a national commission for SC and STs. Because of the realization of the differential requirements of the two entities, they had actually bifurcated. Now you have two different entities for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now the realization had come within the scheduled tribes also, there are so many variants, and hence to address those categories, additional, the new commissions and committees are being established for those, like nomadic populations or the criminal tribes or DNTs kind of thing. So the realization has come, the government has now come to understand that there are specific requirements for each of the community, and hence specific administrative mechanisms have to be there, specific provisions, specific funding, and resource allocation. So all these things have to be category wise to be mentioned, and that is how in this whole thing you are actually trying to picturize that government over a period of time has come to an understanding that we cannot have omnibus kind of schemes for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes. We cannot put them into one single category. There is a difference in them, and then government is trying to address them differently. So be positive on that, because that's how the work is going on. If at all you think that at any point of time there is a lacuna in that, you are free to incorporate that. See, this is where is the lacuna that is, say for example, nomadic, semi-nomadic population, there are certain problems are there. You may perhaps list those problems, 1, 2, 3. Be very specific, point wise likhiyega. Discussion rahega and then point wise rahega. It has to be that healthy combination there. And social and religious consequences of contact between tribal and non-tribal populations. Problem is with culture contact. So you can go by Vidyarthi, you can go by Sharma, who believed that all tribal problems are because of culture contact. Social, religious consequences. Okay. So culture contact can be one, that is religious contact. The other could be economic, political, economic, and दोनों एक ही साथ लिख सकते हो, technological. Within religious, you can have based on the religion, Christianization, Islamization, Hinduization. So change in the economic subsistence, change in economic subsistence, commercialization, commodification of tribal economy. Next year जब आप एग्ज़ाम लिख रहे हो, वो एग्ज़ाम के लिए commodification of tribal economy पढ़िएगा. Kind of things, and tribal panchayats being replaced, and extension of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, modern democracies, they coming into state, becoming a part of state societies. నా హ్యాండ్ రైటింగ్ బాగోదు, నువ్వు దాన్ని మళ్ళీ ఫోటో తీస్తావు, ఏం మాస్టర్. ప్రపంచానికి అంత చూపించడానికి చూడు నా టీచర్ అంత దరిద్రంగా రాస్తుందా అని, అంత అవసరం అని చెప్పు. తెలుసు టైం అయింది, ఇంకేముంది లాస్ట్కి వచ్చాం కదా. These are certain things, sir. But then this question cannot is not comprehensive until otherwise you are trying to bring the internal details also. Like when you're talking about say Hinduization, you will have to bring tribe caste continuum. Or maybe when you're talking about Christianization impact of the mission, you may be writing in point, but these are huge questions, sir. This is a very big question. To what extent we can push in the content is based on how in a very crisp way you are able to generate those points. पहले आपका structure ठीक हो. And mostly students are actually were actually writing about religious contact only. बाकी का नहीं आया answers में. I mean, I still have to talk to the people. Couple of people whom I have spoke, that's what had happened. तो ये है. बाकी जो questions हैं यहाँ पर 8B भी मुझे ये पढ़ने का भी टाइम नहीं मिला था. I was actually rushing to the class. 8B that's why मेरा typing भी नहीं हुआ. I didn't write. Briefly describe the anthropological perspective on development. How have anthropologists contributed in India's rural development? Okay. Anthropological perspective on development and contribution of anthropology to rural development. Basically, sir, this is a question talking about one in the phases of development of Indian anthropology. We have second phase, by which time we started to have village studies and caste studies along with the tribal studies. It is actually from that phase onwards where we see the contribution of anthropologists there. So basically in the first part you will have to talk about what are the strengths of anthropology. What are the strengths of anthropology in dealing with the idea of development, and what according to anthropology is development. That is where we bring in cultural relativistic perspective. Cultural relativistic perspective, meaning you are actually trying to bring in the field of development anthropology. According to development anthropology, what exactly is development? So it is not something which is imposed by a mainstream society on somebody. It is something that is decided, it is something that is internalized, internally generated kind of a thing. And that is how it is. So emic perspective and etic perspective you will have to add. From the emic perspective development, and then how exactly to approach them has to be decided on those lines. And how anthropologists contributed to Indian rural development. In Indian rural development, basically for rural development they have a strength, that is the content. First thing anthropologists have is they have a content related to rural India that is being studied, whether that is village studies, agrarian studies or caste related studies. All those aspects that make, or institutions such as family, institutions such as Jajmani, all these aspects which are actually the part and parcel of Indian village, they are the subject matter, and hence it is a discipline that is qualified to contribute to rural studies. This is number one. Second one is, when it comes to rural development, something that you will have to make a point there, that in the early times of independence, that is before the critical phase or before the analytical phase of Vidyarthi, good amount of contribution was made by anthropologists in rural development. You can give the list of people. So basically there was good work done in the second phase. There was good work done in the second phase. Where you can have list of thinkers that have come. In those list of thinkers, what you will have to do is, apart from Indian thinkers, you also try to give American thinkers whose forte was rural studies or the village studies. So if at all we are adding the good lot of American thinkers, you have good content, I mean, to present there. That is, and then And then you may perhaps talk about how the fall of anthropological contribution towards the rural development or the village studies had happened in the post 1970s era. This is, I mean, this actually is taking the answer to the negative side, but then not to worry on that. You may perhaps towards the conclusion, you may perhaps speak of this, that when incorporation of global NGO work there or the multinational corporations kind of things are getting involved, what is actually necessary now is the academia and the administration to actually come up with mechanisms of applying anthropological principles for a better working, better understanding of the problems of rural development. So, basically speaking, there is a negative thing there, there is a low there, but then from the low you try to show that the discipline of anthropology still holds this capability, this strength of working positively towards the problems of either the farmers or either the rural communities. I hope it is clear. Did you get the answer? We started with a high, we went to the lower step, and when we are at the lowest level, we are trying to say that this is not the end of it, the discipline is still capable of working for the betterment of the people. You are there? ठीक है? Positive end చేసుకుందాం, తప్పేముంది? How can a balance be struck between livelihood concern and environmental degradation in the context of shifting cultivation? Shifting cultivation, the ban of Shifting Cultivation Act says that it is not possible. How can a balance be struck between livelihood concern and environmental degradation? See, the problem is, the act banning Shifting Cultivation Act had come long time back, decades ago it has come. But similar to several other acts, this act also has people who are still clinging to shifting cultivation in the remote areas. It is in that context such kind of a question arises. And hence, you will have to bring the ideas from that act itself. The act brings out that shifting cultivation is not environment friendly, environmentally degrading in a particular sense. See, reasons could be whatever, reasons could be mainstream population increasing and all that stuff. But then the shifting cultivation areas have come down. When the areas have come down, its vagaries came out, I mean its negative aspects came out. And those negative aspects are highlighted by the Shifting Cultivation Eradication Act. And now, because of this, what we may perhaps talk about is, there can be certain kind of, certain kind of provisions we may give, livelihood concerns. So, maybe perhaps plantation agriculture we may recommend to them, like joint forest management with the Gond communities that was successfully done by the Government of India. So, we may perhaps bring certain case studies to show that in the shifting cultivation areas, gradually we may make them sedentary cultivators with patch-wise development of the agricultural areas. The problem is shifting cultivators do not have the land rights in the first place. Second thing is, even where there are regions, there are certain areas where the community owned places are there, because of the kind of shrinking and because of the kind of governmental regulations, no full-fledged work is going on, and hence government has to understand, recognize the necessity, case by case we may handle, like how it was done in the Gond community. We may come up with certain kind of project works, kind of things, where case by case we may perhaps identify and try to use the joint forest management techniques on them. I think that can be the way one can work on. ठीक है, भूख लगी? Thank you so much for your time. और shifting cultivation का भी इसमें लिखा हुआ है मेरे किताब में, हाँ, देख लेना. Have a very good time. Good day. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
complexity. Case by case we may handle, like how it was done in the Gond community. We may come up with certain kind of project works, kind of things where case by case we may perhaps identify and try to use the joint forest management techniques on them. I think that can be the way one can work on. ठीक है, भूख लगी?